So hopefully you had an enjoyable May long weekend if you're in Ontario, and I wasn't able to get any videos posted over the long weekend. Took a bit of a break with the family and whatnot, but wanted to get right back into the swing of things here today as we continue to take a look at the off-season plans for teams in the Ontario Hockey League who have already started their off-season campaigns to prepare for the 2025-26 OHL season. And today, let's take a look at the Flint Firebirds. For Flint, they had a record of 29, 34, 2, and 3 last season, which was good for 63 points. They made the postseason, but were ultimately eliminated by the Kitchener Rangers in 5 games. Now, for the Firebirds, remember, they were one of the more active teams going into the season last year. They made a big splash with the trade with the Kingston Frontenacs, acquiring Christopher Thibodeau, and then, of course, the big trade with the Sudbury Wolves, bringing in the likes of Matthew Mania, Evan Conyon, and also Noah Collins. But this team, just something wasn't clicking. They couldn't get the offense to go. There were times where it looked like this team was ready to take that next step and maybe contend in the West Division, but they seemed snake bit. This team couldn't get things going. Was it chemistry? Who knows? But ultimately, this team falling short of their goal. And what's even more interesting is how in the 23-24 season, this was a team that became sellers at the OHL trade deadline, but at the same time were buyers. It was a confusing time, and they ended 23-24 with 65 points, and they finished 8th in the Western Conference. That's 2 points better than what they had this past season. So it's kind of for a team that's hoping to have a deeper playoff run or be more competitive, still having the same result, finishing at the bottom half of the playoff picture in the Western Conference, and again knocked out in the first round. Last season was at the hands of the London Knights in a 4-game sweep. In 22-23, they finished with 75 points that season, but again, another first-round exit, that time against the Saginaw Spirit. And then you have to go back to 21-22. That was the year that the Flint Firebirds made a push. They had 89 points in the regular season, but ended up falling short in the Western Conference Final, losing in 7 games to the Windsor Spitfires. Flint 1 game away from advancing to an OHL championship, which would have seen them battle the Hamilton Bulldogs in the 2022 OHL Final, but instead it was the Windsor Spitfires who got the edge in that best-of-7 series. So since then, this team has been, trying to keep consistent, making the playoffs, but we haven't seen that deep playoff push since the 2022 playoffs. This past season, now looking at the top 10 scores, Sam McHugh leads the way. He had 36 goals, 19 assists, 55 points. But remember, McHugh was acquired at the OHL trade deadline from the Owen Sound Attack, and they gave up a big young piece with Cole Zarowski, who was their first-round pick in the 2024 OHL priority selection. Now, McHugh, a great talent up front, but at the time of the trade, if you remember, there was rumblings that McHugh might not have reported to Flint after the deal. Thankfully, he did play for the Firebirds, as he was a key piece in the second half of the season for Flint as they made that push for the playoffs. And at times, looked like they were being threatened to be chased out of those final playoff spots in the West, but ultimately getting a playoff position. And McHugh, a big part of that with his offensive talent. Second in team scoring last season was Caden Petrie, 22 goals, 31 assists, 53 points. It's actually quite remarkable how low the points totals are for the top players of the Flint Firebirds last season. Christopher Thibodeau, who they acquired last summer, third in scoring, 22 goals, 28 assists, 50 points. Nathan Aspinall, fourth in scoring with 17 goals, 30 assists, 47 points. Matthew Mania, another player they acquired last summer, 7 goals, 39 assists, 46 points. Alex Kostov, who they picked up from the Greyhounds at the trade deadline in 2024. He was sixth in scoring with 16 goals, 29 assists, 45 points. Then you have Jimmy Lombardi, seventh in scoring, 13 goals, 32 assists, 45 points. Connor Clattenburg, another player they acquired from Sault Ste. Marie at the 2024 trade deadline. He was eighth in scoring with 16 goals, 19 assists, 35 points. Evan Conyon, another player they picked up from Sudbury, 14 goals, 18 assists, 32 points. And rounding out the top 10 is Blake Smith at 10 goals, 22 assists, 32 points. So I mentioned where these players were picked up from because Flint's been a very active team on the trade front these last 2 seasons, trying to stay competitive or maybe get an edge with their competitive style. But also to note, there were no rookies in the scoring in the top 10. They relied on their veteran players or their sophomores to get the job done, which, yes, you want to see that when you're a competitive or a contender in the Ontario Hockey League, but if you're a team that's looking to the future, you do want to see some of the youth contributing offensively. So that's an area maybe of concern, but just something to keep in mind as they go into next season. Their first round pick from the 2025 OHL priority selection was Charlie Murata. He was selected 8th overall. He's already committed to the Flint Firebirds, so that's exciting news for Flint. Last season, playing with the Don Mills Flyers, 21 goals, 19 assists, 40 points in 32 games, as he'll look to make an impact in his first year in the Ontario Hockey League. Now, there are several candidates in the running to be an overage player for the Flint Firebirds next season. So these are your 2005 born players. So at the end of the regular season, these are the players that could be candidates next season, although circumstances will vary depending on the NHL draft status. But Christopher Thibodeau, he leads the way. He could be an overage candidate next season. I think it'd be fitting. Thibodeau does have that creative side. He's one of your top scorers last season, so he could be one of your OAs going into next year. Sam McHugh, who they acquired from Owen Sound, he is a Toronto Maple Leafs prospect. He has yet to sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time of recording. The Leafs do have until June 1st to sign McHugh, so we'll have to wait and see. Could he be an OA candidate for next season? Connor Clattenburg, he's an Edmonton Oilers prospect. He is signed with Edmonton, so it's likely he'll play for the Bakersfield Condors in the American Hockey League next year would be my guess, but he is eligible to be an overager next season for the Flint Firebirds. Then you also have Matthew Wang. He was one of the depth players on the team last season, but he had an impact. There was a time where he was registering points on a consistent basis. He could be a pretty good OA candidate for the Firebirds or another team in the Ontario Hockey League. And then on the blue line, Matthew Mania. He's a Los Angeles Kings prospect, unsigned at this point. And then Urban Padrekar. He was acquired from the Niagara Ice Dogs in the Tristan Bertucci trade. For Padrekar, he is an import, so he would take 2 positions if you bring him back as an OA. So an OA and an import, but do remember, starting next season, teams will be allowed 3 imports on their roster. And also a 2005 born is Nathan Day, the goaltender. He's an Edmonton Oilers prospect. He is signed with Edmonton, but with goaltenders, there is a chance that they do come back for their OA season. But still, depending on his health and the system for the Edmonton Oilers, there's a chance that Nathan Day does not return next year, which would be really too bad. He's one of those more underrated goaltenders in the Ontario Hockey League. Is it because he plays for the Flint Firebirds? That's a possibility, but I do like the play of Nathan Day. He would be a huge boost if he does return for an OA season with the Flint Firebirds. And just going into next season, I feel as though this is a team that's trying to extend that window to be competitive. Ever since that 2022 playoff run where they lost to Windsor in Game 7, I just feel as though this team trying to force their way back into contention through trades, which at the National Hockey League level, sure, you could do that. You can make the trades to try and extend your window, but in junior hockey, it's a cycle. You have a couple of years where you're a contender, and then you go back into the rebuild mode. And for junior hockey, with you're trying to extend your window by trade, doesn't typically work. And I wonder if we're seeing that in action here with the Flint Firebirds, as they've had 65 points last year, and then this past season, 63 points in a year that they made even more trades to try and stay competitive. I almost feel like maybe this is a team that needs to embrace the junior hockey cycle. That's what maybe is holding them back from becoming a contender once again in the OHL's Western Conference, because they were busy last year acquiring the likes of Thibodeau, Mania, Conyon, Collins, and then McHugh at the deadline. So I feel like the Firebirds, they're kind of stuck in neutral in the West Division. They should be a playoff team next year based on this roster. They've got some big decisions to make when it comes to the overage spot. But for Flint, I don't know if they're going to challenge for top spot in the West Division. I had them as my pick to maybe win the West last year just with all the moves. But this year, I'm kind of holding back. Maybe they'll be a team that finishes between 5th and 8th, much like we saw this year. So I do like the foundation of this Firebirds team, but we'll have to wait and see how things play out. Do they make even more moves during the offseason once that summer trade window opens or before the OHL regular season? So the Flint Firebirds, a team that's got some interesting pieces. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But if you're a fan of the Firebirds, what are your expectations for the team? What are your thoughts coming out of the 24-25 OHL season? Love the interaction. Thank you very much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.